Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling one of humanity's oldest and most powerful stories, the Great Flood. Now, it's a tale you definitely think you know, but its roots, well, they stretch a lot further and deeper than you probably imagine.
So, let's just jump right in with a question that kind of changes everything. What if the story of Noah's Ark wasn't the original? What if it was actually an echo of a much, much older story, one that was etched into clay tablets thousands of years before it was ever written down in the sacred book?
Because believe it or not, that is exactly what happened. In the 1800s, archaeologists digging through the ruins of an ancient library in Nineveh unearthed this incredible poem, the Epic of Gilgamesh. And on its 11th tablet, there it was. The story of a hero who gets a warning from a god about a great flood, who's commanded to build a giant ship to save himself and all living things. It was shockingly familiar.
And when you look at the timeline, it is just stunning. The Gilgamesh story was written down around 1800 BCE. The Torah's account of Noah comes more than 1,000 years later, and the Quran's version follows centuries after that. This discovery didn't just add a new story to the pile. It showed us this deep, ancient current running right through human history.
So our focus here isn't just on the flood itself. It's about how this one terrifying event was seen, how it was understood, and how it was retold across completely different worlds.
And this wasn't just a Middle Eastern thing. Not by a long shot. As you can see, more than 200 cultures have their own flood myths. So does this point to some kind of collective memory of a real, world-changing catastrophe? It's possible. But for our purposes, we're going to focus on how three major traditions took this shared trauma and found three very different meanings inside of it, and in doing so, trace the evolution of religious thought itself.
To really understand each story, you have to start with the motive, the why behind the flood. Well, it reveals everything about the nature of the divine power in each version of the story.
This table really lays out the core differences. Just look at how the divine motive evolves. It starts in Gilgamesh with something almost petty. The gods are just annoyed because humans are being too loud. Then, in the Torah, it becomes this profound moral sadness over the world's corruption. And finally, in the Quran, it's a matter of divine justice for stubborn disbelief. And the reason the hero gets saved changes right along with it, from a secret tip-off to personal goodness to being a prophet of God.
The Quran really emphasizes that this was not a rash decision. Noah, it says, preached to his people for 950 years. I mean, think about that. A lifetime of patient warning. The flood only comes after that prolonged refusal to listen. So it's not framed as a punishment for just general sin, but as the direct consequence of rejecting a prophet's clear message. So here's the crucial point, this evolution. We go from these, well, pretty fickle, easily annoyed gods in Gilgamesh, to a single moral God who's saddened by universal corruption in the Torah, all the way to a just God responding to the specific, conscious rejection of a revelation in the Quran. The nature of the crime perfectly mirrors the nature of the judge. Okay, next, let's look at the actual vessel of salvation, the Ark. Because even in the way the ship is described, we find a story about what each text really values most. Is this about a feat of engineering, or is it a test of faith?
Here, what the story focuses on tells you everything. Gilgamesh and the Torah, they're all about the blueprints. Gilgamesh describes this perfect but also completely unstable cube. The Torah gives these very practical, seaworthy dimensions, almost like an engineering schematic. But the Quran? It gives no dimensions at all. The most important instruction is, build the ark under our eyes and by our inspiration. The how doesn't matter. By whose command is everything. The whole focus shifts from engineering to obedience.
And the Quran adds this powerful human drama you just don't get in the other accounts. As Noah is building this giant ship on dry land, the leaders of his people walk by and ridicule him. But his response isn't anger. It's just as calm certainty in the divine promise. The ark isn't just a boat anymore. It's a public test of faith in the face of mockery. It's a lesson in perseverance that would have really resonated. All right, now for the climax. The storm hits. The world is submerged. The way each story shows the peak of this disaster and what happens after reveals the ultimate message about divine power and the promise of a new world.
In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the scene is just pure chaos. The storm they unleashed is so violent that the gods themselves get terrified. The text says they fled to the highest heaven and cowered like dogs. They regret their decision. They're weeping over the destruction. It's this striking image of divine power that is limited, emotional, and not fully in control of its own creations.
Now, contrast that with the Torah. Here, there is zero divine panic. The description is one of silent, absolute, overwhelming power. The waters just cover everything, every mountain under the whole sky. It's a depiction of a cosmic, unopposed judgment. God's emotions are shown before and after the flood, but not during. The act itself is just total and absolute.
The Quran takes this cosmic event and zooms all the way in on a heartbreaking personal tragedy. As the waves are swelling like mountains, Noah sees his own son, who didn't believe, and he makes this one last desperate plea. "Oh, my son, come aboard with us." But the son refuses. He trusts a mountain to save him, and he's swept away. The message from God is crystal clear. The bond of faith is stronger than the bond of blood. It's all about personal choice.
And the promise made after the flood? That evolves dramatically too. In Gilgamesh, salvation is basically a private prize. The hero and his wife get immortality, but that's it. The Torah expands this into a universal, unconditional promise made to all of humanity, symbolized by the rainbow. And the Quran specifies the promise again, as peace and blessings given directly to the community of the faithful. You can see the clear shift from a personal reward to a universal promise to a community-based blessing.
So, this brings us to our final section. We've seen one ancient story give us three totally distinct narratives, but there's a fourth, really powerful interpretation, one that doesn't retell the story, but completely reframes it.
Yeah, the New Testament doesn't give us another flood story. Instead, it uses it as what's called a type, a symbol. The waters of the flood that wash the world clean become a symbol for the waters of baptism. And the ark itself becomes a metaphor for Christ or the church, the vessel you have to be inside to be saved. The historical story gets transformed completely into a spiritual allegory.
So the crucial point is really this. You have this single ancient echo of a terrible disaster. And that one echo has just resonated through history, transformed by different cultures to teach profoundly different lessons about the nature of God, the meaning of morality, the path to salvation, and the very essence of faith.
From the fickle gods of Mesopotamia to the moral law of the Torah, the call to faith in the Quran, and the spiritual symbolism of Christianity. One catastrophe, four profound lessons. So I'll just leave you with this question. Which one of these ancient interpretations, the fear of arbitrary power, our universal moral responsibility, the importance of personal faith, or the search for a spiritual metaphor, which one do you think speaks louder?